everybody, it's Angel from Halo Inspirations. We give you inspirations to help you spread beauty and joy through your quilting journey. Happy hump day, whoop whoop, happy Wednesday to each and every one of you. So today we're focused on intro to foundation paper piecing. We're going to foundation paper piece today, okay? That's the focus of the video. Now I have taught this class right here in the brick and mortar with this table topper. Exactly. Now I use different fabrics for the class, and you know, I have another table topper that looks a little different, but it's the same product. So we are focused on intro to foundation paper piecing, but I always want to give a little something to do with it so that you're just not making a block and then it just sits there, right? However, saying that, I do have this table topper. So if you are inclined to make it, I am using It's So Emma's 6-inch square in a square foundation paper piecing paper, okay, that comes in a pad. This is in our shop. It's available for you if you are just loving the way that looked. I will also tell you this pattern is charm square friendly. If you buy a charm pack or a 5-inch square stacker or a 5-inch square pack, you will have plenty of fabric for all of the color, okay? It's a 5-inch square that I used in the middle. It's 5-inch squares that I used for the background around the center square. And then it's also 5-inch squares that I cut up for those little tiny finished 2-inch 4 patches, okay? And you'll have plenty of fabric in one charm pack, okay, for you to get that done. As far as the sashing goes, it is Dapple Dot Rainbow. So it's got all the colors in little dots all over that beautiful fabric. That we also have in the house. Now you'll need 1/3 of a yard, okay? You'll have plenty, you'll have a couple inches extra when you do that, the way that we cut it up. And so that's 12 inches is what that boils down to. You actually just need 9 inches, but man, then you couldn't square your fabric, you might get a little short on one side, you know. So I extended it to the 12-inch. A lot of places we can't order by 1/3, so you'd have to buy a half, and then guess what? There goes your stash, right? Because that's how it all happens. But it gives you plenty. 1/3 of a yard though for the sashing. If you were to keep going, you would need, to make it easy, it's 3/4 yard of backing. It's that you'll have plenty again left over, but what'll happen is that way you just have one piece. You don't have to piece the backing, okay? This will finish at 18.5 by 34.5. All right. The binding, you'll need 1/4 yard, plain and simple. No matter if you do 2.5-inch strips or 2.25-inch strips, between the two of them, they're both 1/4 yard is what you will need for the binding. Okay, so yes, I don't have a name for it. Do you have a suggestion? I will tell you the charm pack that I did use, or the 5-inch square pack that I used, is Rainbow Lane. However, I don't have any of those left, and I don't know that you'll be able to find them. So anything with some color is going to work just perfect, okay? Royal Knights might work very well. That'll be pretty. That'll be really pretty. If I did that, I might do a black background. I don't know. Maybe gray. No, I'd keep it at white, I think. I don't know. That is a very colorful 10-inch square pack or 5-inch square pack that you may find. That's another nice one. So there are plenty of options. Of course, you could just use your scraps. It's a true story. You can use scraps. Okay, so one of the other things, I'm going to dive right in here. We're going to get the foundation paper piecing done, which are it's backwards for me. I always have a hard time with that. It is the center block is the square in a square that we use the foundation paper piecing for, okay? This is probably the easiest foundation paper piece block. Well, almost the easiest. I mean, it's got 5 pieces as opposed to 2. So it is super easy. Makes it super fun to learn with. Okay. So we're going to dive right in. I do want to tell you, lower your stitch count. I use 1.8. Some people use 1.6 on their machine. Okay. If you go too low, it's going to perforate the paper before you're done. If you're too high, when you go to rip the paper, it'll be more difficult and it might even pull on those threads a bit. So I use 1.8. I've used 1.6 on occasion, but sometimes it'll perforate on my machine. It perforates the paper a little bit too early, and we want to keep it intact until the block is done. So lower the stitch count for the foundation paper piecing. All the rest of it you can put to your regular sewing desire. Okay. It's okay if you forget to change it. I did for a while. Kept on going. So 1.8, lower the stitch count for foundation paper piecing. Makes that ripping of the paper so much easier. Okay, guys. So let's go ahead and dive in. And I'll see you in just a sec. So for this tutorial, I believe this is the easiest foundation paper piecing ever. Okay. It's a 6-inch square quilt block. As you can see, I do use It's Sew Emma. I get their paper. Their paper is really nice. It stitches nice. It comes out easy. Very easy to follow. So that's what I'm using. It is in our shop if you're so interested. So this is what we're using. And I've pulled out a piece so we can talk about it. I also have pins and I also have glue. I use a little bit of glue. Okay. So what we're looking at here is the square in a square. And as you can see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. And it's real important to understand this is kind of like paint by number, but we're stitching by number. Okay. Now in the book, it does give you the sizes that they recommend. I'm doing something just a little different with it, only because I wanted to make this super fun and super easy. But I will tell you, some of the measurements are a little better for getting this done. Okay. Making it just even a little bit easier for you if you use the measurements that they recommend in the pad. Okay. So we have everything ready. I will tell you I use an open toe foot, which you will see. That's the only other real thing I believe. As we keep going along here, we can discuss things. Okay. So the first thing I did is I have a block ready to go. And if we digest a little harder and we look at this a little further, what is here are some triangles, and this is a 5-inch square from a 5-inch square pack. If you don't have a 5-inch square pack and you have a 10-inch square pack, you can cut these into a couple of 5-inch squares from one side, keeping the other half chunk ready for something else, or maybe you're going to do what I did with the quilt top. So we have a 5-inch square in the center. Very, very easy. You can cut that up from your stash. You can, or use a charm pack. Okay. These guys, what happens, I'm just going to move this out of the way a little bit. Okay. You take a 5-inch square. So everything's all about charm packs. And basically, I'm just going to cut right down the middle. Okay. Giving me 2 triangles. Might help if I cut all the way through. There we go. Always hold your ruler before making sure you cut all the way through it, guys. And that's exactly what these are on the sides. Okay. They are half by diagonal of a 5-inch square. Okay, so that was all the prep. All right, now some of the other things that we do use, of course, the paper, which we're going to get started here in just a second. And then I do have a rotary cutter and this add a quarter ruler plus. Okay, so on this add a quarter ruler, if you take a gander at it, what we have is a beveled edge on one side. Okay, it's beveled right here, and a really thin side of the ruler. Okay, now this is 6 inches possibly. Let's just measure. 5.5, 6. It is a 6-inch ruler. Okay, they come in 6-inch and they also come in a 12-inch, and I usually use a 12-inch, but I've got it with another project in a project box with it, so I went ahead and pulled the 6-inch. It works just fine, and I'll show you how that can be done. So an add a quarter ruler plus, and your rotary cutter, your glue, some pins, your paper, and your prep boxes, okay, or blocks. Okay, now looking at this, number 1 is the center. Number 2, 3, 4, and 5 are on the sides. Okay, so I'm going to pick this up, my triangles, in the order of which I'm going to sew. So I'm going to do 2, and then I'm going to do 3, okay, and then I'm going to do 4, and then I'm going to do 5. This way I do not have to think. We just don't want to have to think too much and confuse ourselves in which one's which. Now looking at this a little further, these lines right here, they go all the way to the end of this outer line. This is the lines of which we are going to stitch. Okay, and then this outer line is where we're going to trim it to. It's what gives us the 6.5 by 6.5. You don't have to use this particular product. You can use another square and a square foundation paper piece. Just make sure you understand which one you trim and which one is, if they have a 1/4 inch labeled on it, or if they have a trim, making sure that it's the right size and that you understand where to go. Okay, so we're going to start with number 1. Okay, and we know that it has to be at least a 1/4 inch bigger all the way around the block that we're going to fill in. Okay, so this needs to be at least a 1/4 inch bigger. It can be even bigger than that, and you can trim it down, but you want it to be at least a 1/4 inch. Now the really cool thing about this is that you can easily see that if we center this up where we're just kind of sticking out a little bit on each side, that it in fact covers everything that we need to cover. Okay, goes all the way to the top. You can see that I'm about a 1/4 inch, if not a little more, on each side. So I really like this pattern for this reason. It makes it really easy to follow along. So block 1. Now we don't put it on this side because then we couldn't see the lines to stitch. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to flip it over. Now if you have a light box, you can use a light box to be able to see through the paper. It's nice. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and center this up all the way around. Okay, and if I want to check it, I could pick it up and I can look through the lighting. Okay, because you can actually see the fabric through the paper. They have done a really nice job about doing that. Okay, but we're going to glue it. All right, so I'm just going to take a peek back here, and you can see I'm pretty good all the way around. I'm thinking I'm liking where it's at. You could glue before, or you could glue after, like meaning before you put the fabric down. But I'm just going to give myself a little bit of glue, and I've moved it. I'm kind of guessing. I mean, I could always pick it up. I could put my finger where the X is, where they meet, so that I know the glue is there. And I'm going to pull this down just a little. And whoops, where I think it will be, I am going to pull it up and take a little peek. Darn it. Okay. I'm going to take a little peek. I think we're good. Is it perfect? It doesn't have to be. I just have to be beyond the lines, guys. Okay. And then I'm going to press it down. Okay. I'm going to flip it over. And I will tell you, I can feel the edge of the fabric. And this is where the edge of the fabric is. So I'm definitely beyond the line of which I'm going to stitch. So this was block number 1. Okay. So we're going to go and stitch 2 to 1, okay? So the first thing we do to prep ourselves, if we get our handy dandy add a quarter ruler plus, we're going to line up the thin edge, okay, on to the line area, and I'm going to take my fabric, and I don't know why I did this in this direction. I am right-handed, but you know, today I'm ambidextrous, I guess. And I'm going to give myself a nice fold. Okay? And then I'm going to turn it because I can't cut with my left hand. Now that beveled edge, so we use this to do the folding. Okay? And now we're using that beveled edge, that place that has a little nook, and we're just simply going to slide it until it butts that fold. Okay? That's giving us a 1/4 inch. It is a 1/4 inch from where that fold meets the ruler and the outside. So now we know we're getting a 1/4 inch. I'm going to go ahead and take my rotary cutter, and I'm going to cut a nice straight edge of that 1/4 inch. Okay. Pick up the ruler, flip it over. Now we have, this was important, we did put the fabric right side facing up on the back side of the fabric, or of the square. Okay. The next piece, all the rest of the pieces, it's just that first piece that we lay down with the right side facing up. You have to think, it's just like if we were going to sew any 2 pieces of fabric together, we make them right sides together, right? So we need the right side facing up, so that when we grab the next piece, which is piece number 2, okay, we're going to be able to put it right sides together, and they're going to work, okay? Then what you do, we're lining up the raw edge of which we cut together, both raw edges together, right sides facing. Now something that I like to do is I like to pin it. Now normally we pin where we sew, but if we did that, the pin is going to get in the way of the feed dogs. Okay, so I don't want to pin it near. I just want to pin in a place that it's just going to hold it until I get over to the sewing machine. That's all I'm doing. Okay, so I'm pinning way down here. If I pinned closer up here, I'm going to wrinkle the paper, and it's going to not necessarily give me a straight line. Okay, so I'm just going to pin it a couple of places. Okay, that's just enough to hold it till I get to the sewing machine. So flipping it over, what we're going to do is we're going to sew on this line, okay, between piece 1 and piece 2. Okay, and I can see that this fabric isn't folded under. like so. You know, if it got folded, I wouldn't be able to see it, and I knew that I had a problem. So I'm going to make sure that this fabric stays where I can see it. Okay, and again, we're just going to stitch between 1 and 2. Okay, now if you didn't have this paper, you had a different piece and it was a smaller block or a larger block, or maybe whatever you decide to do, keep with the same block, because they all can be just a little different. And if you want to know if your triangle was big enough for this space, you could simply line it, put it right on top with a 1/4 inch below that line, and make sure that your pieces that you cut were big enough, and mine are. Okay, they go out beyond this line, which we're going to trim off. Okay, so that's a good indicator. But if you use this paper, a 5-inch square works. Okay, if you're using another one, you'll have to measure your blocks. All right, so we're going to take this over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch with you from 1 to 2. All right, here we are at the sewing machine, and again, I'm making sure that my fabric is not folded under. It is sticking out on top. I'm going to make sure that I grab my thread so it doesn't disappear on me, and I like to hand wheel down to the place of which I want to start. And I want to start right, oh, you can't hardly see that. Let me pull that out from the light. Okay, we're going to want to start right there. Okay, right where the trim line and that number 2 to number 1 line meet. Okay, so I'm going to load it underneath, making sure my fabric is flat. And I'm going to lower that needle with my hand wheel exactly where I want it to be. Lower the presser foot. I have my hand on the thread, and I'm actually going to back stitch here because we're going to manipulate this paper with this fabric, and then I'm just going to go ahead and stitch all the way down. This is not a race. Take your time as you need. Now when I get down to that next point where the number 2 line meets the trim line, I will back stitch again. And it's okay if you go over a stitch. It's really okay. We're going to trim it, which is another reason I like to back stitch. Okay, we're going to go ahead and cut threads, and we're going to pull it back underneath the overhead camera for you. So here we are, back where we were. And the first thing I'm going to do is snip the thread. Okay. Then I'm going to flip over the paper, remove the pins. Now, if you'll notice, I didn't keep that really straight. It's okay, guys. It really is. That's the beautiful thing behind foundation paper piecing. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and press this open. Okay. Now I'm going to press the first one with you. So I'm going to pull in my ironing board, or pressing board, and we're going to press the first one with you. But after that, you'll understand I'm not going to press every block with you because it would take too long. So let me grab the pressing board, and I'll see you in just a sec. We're going to go ahead and press. Now, one thing I will say, I do have my iron set at the cotton setting, the highest setting we got, extra hot, love hot. And we're going to do the same thing that we normally do when we press. We're going to set the seam and then press it open. Now, whatever you do, you might not want to use steam. And I say that because the water will, affect the paper, and we don't want to do that. But you can most certainly press on the paper. So we're going to go ahead and set the seam, okay? and then I'm going to press it open. Just like so. And now we're ready for our next block. So let me pull you back to the cutting board. I'll see you in just a sec. I zoomed it out just a little bit so that you could see more of the block that we have going on. And so we've done 1 to 2. So now we're going to do block number 3. We're going to sew 3 to 1. Okay? We've done 1 to 2. Now we'll do 3 to 1. So what we got to do first, this is all going to be repeated for the rest of the duration. But what you're going to do is you're going to take that thin side of the add a quarter ruler. You're going to line it up on that line. You're going to give it a press. Give yourself a smooth line there. Go ahead and spin the block if you didn't fold it the way you cut. Now we're going to butt up the ruler until it stops on the fold using the other side. Go ahead and cut yourself a 1/4 inch straight edge. Okay. So now that's 2. We're doing 3. We're going to flip it back over so we get the right side of the fabric. Grab the next block, the next side, and again we'll do the same thing. I'm just going to eyeball it, and then I'm going to pin. I lined up those raw edges together. I lined up the fabric so it's right sides together. I'm pinning much lower than where I'm going to stitch so my paper stays flat and the feed dogs don't catch the pins. Okay, we'll take it over to the sewing machine, and this time we're going to sew from where the number 3 line meets the trim line all the way until it meets the next trim line. Okay, we're just going to stitch straight on through, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Okay, again I use my hand wheel. Lower the presser foot, do a couple of stitches, back stitch, forward stitch until we get to the end. Cut threads. Okay, first thing we do, snip, flip, pull, and press. So I'll get this pressed off camera and I'll see you for the next block. Nice and pressed, ready to go. We've done 1, 2, and 3. So now we're going to number 4. Okay. Now this time I will tell you we have stitch, so you can't just pull over to fold on the line. And I don't know why, but I am more successful in doing about what I'm about to do here. I'm more successful in having the paper facing me, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold on to my threads and I'm just going to pull that paper a little bit down past the line. Okay, now I don't know why, but if I pull this direction I'm just not as successful. It tends to not pull right, so I just leave the paper up. And I just want to pull a little, just one stitch past the line if I can. Okay, that will enable us to take the flat end of the add a quarter ruler, line it up on that line, and fold a nice crease. Okay. I'm going to give it a nice press here. Okay. Now you'll see we're going to cut. Remember I said I went ahead and back stitched a little. We were manipulating it. Well, we're going to cut into it. And you'll see that this doesn't quite go all the way across, being that it's 6" and not the 12", but that's okay, because all you have to do, line that little notch up so it hits that fold, okay, giving you a nice 1/4 inch. We're going to start to cut, and then we'll just slide up the ruler. And then you do want to make sure you cut through all the fabric. That was waste. That's waste, guys. That's waste. Okay. Then we're going to flip it open. I'm going to grab my next triangle. Remember, I put them in order so I don't have to think. Again, just like normal, guys, we're sewing right sides together. And I'm just going to eyeball. Now, hopefully I don't get my head in the camera view this time. Eyeball the center. We don't have to be absolutely perfect. You want to line up those raw edges. Okay. And then just lining up the raw edges. I want them, you know, as close as possible. All right. And then I'm just going to pin it just to hold it. Long enough for me to get to the sewing machine. And this time we're going to stitch from this trim line on line number 4, going all the way out to the trim line, come straight down all the way to this trim line. Okay, that's all we're doing. And you again are going to be able to see that your fabric is not folded over, because you'll see your corners are sticking out. Okay, because it's real important that it doesn't flip on you. Lower the needle, do a little back stitch, now when you're stitching along this line, you want to make sure that you do in fact stay as close to on the line as possible, especially when you're going over the intersection. Once you reach the other side, give it a back stitch and cut threads. Okay, so here we are. What do? We snip the thread, flip, pull, and press. We only have one more to go. Last one, guys. Last one. So again, the first thing I'm going to do, since we stitched into it, I'm going to pull back a little bit past the stitch line. Okay, on both sides. See how easy that is? Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and now look, this looks like a hot mess, right? We're getting there, guys. We're getting there. So we're going to go ahead, give us a nice crease. Fold that paper over using the other side with the bevel, or with the whatever, the notch. Hit that folded paper. That gives you that 1/4 inch. Make sure you cut all the way through. Giving yourself a nice straight edge. Flip it back over because we got to put right sides together. Our last triangle, we're going to line it up, trying to center it as best as possible. And it just helps if I stand up. I'm trying not to get in the camera. I really am, guys. Okay. Making sure the raw edges are together. Looks pretty good to me. I'm going to pin away from my stitch line. Keep that paper nice and flat. And the pins out of my feed dogs. And we'll take this, and this is the last stitch, guys. We're going to stitch again on line number 5. 5 is connecting to 1. We're going to go from this trim line straight on down to this trim line, okay? All right, here we go. Go ahead and lower that needle. Lower the presser foot, hang on to the thread. I'm making sure that my fabric was flat. Do a little back stitch. Last tip, it helps best if you look forward to where you're stitching and not at the needle, okay? Takes a little bit of practice because we are not comfortable at first, some of us. But once you start to do it, you will sew much straighter if you sew where you look where you're going instead of where you are. Okay, when you get up to that trim line, go ahead and back stitch. Oop, that was a lot. I got a little crazy. Cut threads. Last one, guys. Take that thread. Here we go. Snip, flip, pull, and press. So I'm going to go ahead and get this pressed, and then we're going to go ahead and trim this block up, okay? I'll show you how to get that done. All right, there she is. That don't look like a square and a square, does it? That's okay. We're not quite done. All right. We're going to flip this over. Remember, I've been talking about this trim line forever and a day, right? Well, now we're going to trim it. And there are a couple of ways that you can do it. You can actually use this ruler if you're so inclined and line up along the trim line, your edge to cut. Okay, you could do that. But the method that I like to use, I like to cut it all at once. This is all the scrap I've had, guys. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. All right. So I'm trying to get everything out of the way here because I'm going to show you what I do. So I have a smaller cutting board. If you have a rotating one, it's really nice too. So I have a 6.5 inch square. All right. So what I'm going to do here, without getting in the way, I hope. All right. First things first. The really cool thing about this block is that this right here, this point is 1/4 inch from the trim line, okay? And it's also half of the block. So this is a 6.5 inch block. So I'm going to want to line up my 1/4 inch line so that it meets that point. And then I have a 3 1/4 line right there. Here we go. This is much better. I have it. It's hard to see because it's white, okay, but I can see it. So we have a 3 1/4 inch line that goes all the way across. So your 3 1/4 line needs to be in the point down the middle of it on both sides, okay, and on top and on bottom, okay. And I will tell you another little trick that I have found is On either side of the 3 1/4 line, so I have a 3 1/4 line here, there are 2 little 1/8 line, one on each side. That's the 1/8 and that's the 3/8. I look to see how they're doing on the stitch line also, if they look like they're about equal, okay? And once I feel good about where I'm at, I go ahead and trim 2 sides. So there's one. I'm going to come around to the other side. And I'm going to get the second. Okay. Now, because I have a mat that's small enough, if you don't, you can just walk all the way around it. If you're in your own home and you're not trying to do it on a camera. I'm holding on to this block. Okay. And I'm simply going to spin my mat all the way around. And I'm going to trim the other 2 sides, making sure I did not move anything. It doesn't look like I did. And I'm just going to trim the other 2 sides. And then we have a square in a square, 6-inch, 6 1/2 unfinished, 6 in the finished in the quilt block with beautiful points. Beautiful points, okay? And we didn't even have to worry about figuring out doing that on our own as a traditional piece. That's what foundation paper piecing gives you. Now, that the majority of the most important part of this video was that I share with you an intro to foundation paper piecing. The next thing, if you are interested in making the quilt top that I did, I will tell you, you will repeat this 7 more times to give you 8 of these beautiful blocks, okay? 8 beautiful blocks. It's just a simple table runner. Now, if you're just loving life, you could make more, okay? Isn't that gorgeous? I love color. Woohoo! Okay. However, you could just sew these together. That'd be fun. But I had to add a little more. So what I've done is I've cut a total of 22 6 1/2 by 2 1/2 inch rectangles. And I got a little crazy. And I cut 1 1/2 inch squares of the same colors of fabrics, and I've placed them into 4 patches, which then these measure 2 1/2 inches. Okay, so there are 15 of these blocks, and each one has 4 1 1/2 inch cut squares. So that gives you a grand total of 60 1 1/2 inch squares. Okay. Now, if you didn't want to mess with something so fiddly, you could just cut a 2 1/2 inch square of one color. And that would actually make it very easy, very fun, very easy to do. And you know exactly what colors are what, so you don't, hit a color with the same color, right? But the first part, so I've already done all these, 1 1/2 inch plus 1 1/2 inch square 4 patch. This is now an unfinished at 2 1/2, which is the same size as my sashing strips, okay? So what I'm going to do first is for every sashing strip going on the horizontal, okay, I'm going to sew, oh, you can't even see that. Well, that's okay. Let me pull out the camera for you, and then you'll be able to see a little better. So what we have, I have my sashing strips just kind of laid out. There's some up there too, but you can really see this. There's 3 rows, okay, of horizontal sashing strips. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to lay out my little squares. Okay, this will help me explain exactly what's happening. So we did the 6.5 by 2.5 inch sashing borders, however you want to look at it. Okay, and we have 3 rows of the horizontal. Okay, and I've just simply laid them out and put the 2.5 inch 4 patch on each side. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to attach for this first column, excuse me, I'm going to put a 4 patch on either side, okay, and I'm going to press towards the sashing. For every row, or excuse me, for every column after that, I'm going to just attach the one to the right side, to the right, to the right, always pressing towards the sashing, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and get that done off camera, and I'll see you in just a sec. Once you have all of your horizontals done, you're simply going to lay out the rest of your 6.5 by 2.5 inch rectangles in between each square vertically. And again, it's just keeping it simple, keeping it consistent. That's probably a better word. The first column, I'll sew a left and right side to the block, to the square and a square. Okay. Now, before we go doing this, one thing I wanted to talk about. So you have a couple of options, okay? You can simply pull your papers off now because you're fixing to add something to it, okay? Get them all. Look how easy that comes. And it's a beautiful thing. Now, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll be real with you guys. I go back and forth. You could leave the center in there for now, keeping it intact if you so desire. Or you could rip the whole thing out. But the one really cool thing about doing foundation paper piecing with this block, number 1, your points were pretty, okay? But number 2, and I'll try and zoom in a little bit. If you have any leftovers, you can get it out with tweezers if you so desire. But the really cool thing is that you have 2 stitch lines and you can see your point on every single one of them, okay? And by doing that, when you're sewing anything on it, so when we sew this on, you're going to have your 1/4 inch coming all the way down. And what you'll want to do is you'll want to come so that it's sitting right above it, just right above it, that point, okay? But you're going to be able to see that as you're going, and then you can finish it off, okay? You can also go ahead and rip all the papers out if you so desire. You're still able to see that point at every single corner. Okay, and because the sashing doesn't have any seams, it's really nice to put it down on the bottom, and that way you too also can see your point, okay? So it's up to you. You can actually leave the paper on even when you're sewing them together. You can. But you're going to have little strips to pull. And that doesn't always make for fun, okay? If you just left everything on and you just sewed and then you could see the point here, right? You're going to have a little 1/4 inch seam to pull on each one of those papers. So Either way, it's completely up to you. But the next thing we're going to do is on the first column, you sew left and right. On every column after 2 through 4, just on the right side, okay? So we'll get that done off camera and I'll see you in just a sec. We have 2 rows going on. So for the top row, or what I call row A, we're going to sew the cornerstone and sashing to the block. And that first one, they both have 2. Okay, so you're going to sew them, the cornerstones and sashing, to the blocks, all on the first row. Okay, and because we pressed going towards the sashing, we are able to nest those seams. So it's all we're going to do is just sew each block, give the sashing to the block. Okay, so that's on the first row. What I want to point out is on the second row, or row B. Okay, let me pull all of them up. What we have, so this is the first block. Again, we have 2 of each. Okay, you have the sashing with the cornerstones and sashing with the cornerstones to fulfill it. So we're going to go ahead and sew both top and bottom to the second, or to row B. Okay, so that's that one. The next one will be these 2. Okay, the next one will be these 2. Okay, and then the last one, put that over here, is also just the top and bottom. Okay, whoop, see, that ain't right. Good thing we have sashing and cornerstones. There we go. There we are. So there it is. Okay, top and bottom to the row B. We're going to sew them on, and when we press, I'm going to press on the first 2. I'm going towards the sashing. On the next 2, I'll go towards the block, towards the sashing, towards the block. Okay, that's it right now. So we'll get all our cornerstones and sashings attached to each block and just press. It really doesn't matter which way you press it, as long as you press opposite, so that when you go to nest, it'll all work out. Okay, so I just go up, down. That would be another way to do it. You could press them all going up, all going down, all going up, all going down. That makes it easy. Okay, so I'm going to get this done off camera before we go to the next step. So I'll see you in just a sec. So much closer to getting finished. We're so much closer. So the good thing about, once you have each block with its sashing and cornerstones, we have 4 going across and 2 going down, right? So what I'm going to do is sew these as 2 4 patches. Okay, 2 4 patches. I'll press to the right, to the left, to the right, to the left. Okay, we just have 2 4 patches, and then once we have the 2 4 patches, you sew right down the middle. Don't matter which way you press. Okay, I will probably press towards the sashing. That's just me, because it doesn't have any, mostly no seams, just have some up here, but it's just a 4 patch. But just a 4 patch. It is just a, there's a lot of 4 patches going on here. So sew these two together, sew these two together, right, left, okay? Put them together as a 4 patch, do the same thing with the other two, and then sew the 2 4 patches together, and it will be done. So I will come back at you with a finished quilt top in just a sec. And here she is, all finished. Super cute, right? Yep, now we got to quilt it. So how's that going to happen? I have some ideas. I'm not sure how I'm going to play with it yet, but that's something we can talk about on the live Q&A, and I have a little something else to share with you. So speaking of a live Q&A, I'll be on today at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for any live quilting and answers. 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Why? Because we're in Virginia, right? So I will see you later today. I hope this was helpful to you. But until next time, may you continue to be inspired, productive, ever so joyful, never stop believing, and never stop making your dreams in quilting come true. We love y'all. Happy quilting. Whoop whoop. Happy hump day. See y'all soon.